In this lecture, we are going to learn about the noexcept specifier. And this is a way we have in C++ to specify that we don't want exceptions to propagate out of a given function. And some people misunderstand this specifier. They think that if you say it, it means that you can't throw exceptions in a function with this specifier, but that's not exactly true. The meaning is that exceptions are not allowed to propagate out of a given function. That's what we see here. That's what is really meant with this specifier. Let's look at a few examples. Here we have a simple function, which is a free function. Notice that it is not part of a given class. And we can add this specifier to mean that we don't want exceptions to propagate out of this class here. So for example, if we throw this exception and we have a catch block which doesn't handle it really, it is going to rethrow it to be handled by englobing scopes. This is going to not work because this function is not allowed to propagate exceptions out of it. If we do this, the operating system is going to treat this exception as one that is not handled, and our program is going to terminate immediately. So the std terminate function is going to be called. You should really know this. Again, the meaning is not that we can't throw exceptions. We can throw exceptions safely if they are handled in this function here, and we don't propagate them back either explicitly or implicitly to go and be handled in englobing scopes. That's the meaning here. We can also do this for member functions. So here is a simple example. We have a do something function, which is a member really, and we can mark it as noexcept. This is going to do exactly the same thing. The meaning is that we are not allowed to propagate exceptions out of this function. If we do that, our program is going to terminate immediately and we won't be able to do anything else. This is the meaning here. Now that you know this, we're going to head over to Visual Studio Code and play with this a little more. Here we are in our working folder. The current project is noexcept specifier. We are going to grab our template files and put them in place. And let's open this in Visual Studio Code by dragging and dropping here. This is going to give us our main CPP file. We are going to do the usual, clean it up a little bit. We are going to set up a simple function, which we are going to mark as noexcept. This is the syntax to do that. You say noexcept exactly like you see here. And this is going to show up after the parameter list. This is how we do this. And this side, we're going to set up a simple exception that we are trying to propagate out of this function by rethrowing it in our catch block here. This is what we are doing. Now, we are going to try and call this function in the main function. So let's do that here. And you see that we are doing something relatively innocent. We are trying to handle any kind of exception that comes out of this function here. And we are going to catch the errors and handle them exactly like they should. But this is going to crash our program and it is going to terminate immediately because we are trying to propagate an exception out of a noexcept function here. This is the meaning. So our program is going to crash immediately the moment we rethrow it because we are not allowed to do that. Even if we really try to set up things as safely as we can by trying to handle the exception here, this is not going to help because we are not allowed to propagate exceptions out of this function in the first place. So this is the setup here. Let's try and build the program and show you that it is actually going to terminate immediately. The build is going to be good. The problem is going to come up after we run the program. You see that the build is finished with a warning. So we are getting a good warning from our compiler that we really shouldn't propagate an exception out of a noexcept function here. This is the setup we do, but we are going to be stubborn and ignore the warning and run the program anyway. So let's bring up a PowerShell window and do that. We are going to clear and run Rooster, and we are going to see that this is going to terminate immediately because the exception is not meant to be propagated out of this function. And if the operating system sees that we are trying to do that, our program is going to be killed immediately. This is what you can achieve with the noexcept specifier here. This can also work for member functions. So if we go to the top here and set up a simple class called item, which is going to have a simple member function that we are marking as noexcept, If we try to do the same thing and propagate an exception out of here, this is not going to work. We are going to have a crash and our program is not going to work as we expect. We can comment this out and run the code for our class. Let's do that. We are going to go down and say that we are using a noexcept member function. And let's put in a simple piece of code. We are going to create an object and try to call this method on it. And this is going to supposedly throw an exception that is going to be propagated out of this function here. But this is going to give us a crash because our program is going to terminate immediately. We are not supposed to do that because that's what the noexcept specifier really means. No exception is supposed to be propagated out of a noexcept function. And if we do that, our program is going to terminate immediately. That's what we are going to see here. Let's build and see that. The build is going to be good with a warning. Possibly, you see we have our warning here. And if we are stubborn, ignore the warning and run our program, we are going to see that this is going to crash. And this is what we can achieve with the noexcept specifier. Please note that if you don't propagate the exception out of your function, the code is going to just work fine. The only limitation you add with the noexcept specifier is that exceptions can't go out of this function here. Let's remove the rethrow statement here and show you that the code is going to work just fine. We are going to build this with GCC and you are going to see that we still have it in our class. Let's remove that and let's build again and pass this through GCC. The warnings should go away. Now everything is going to work fine because we really aren't trying to propagate an exception out of a noexcept function or member function. This is really all I had to share in this lecture. I hope you found it interesting. We are going to stop here in this one. In the next one, we're going to learn about exceptions and destructors, and we're going to see some things you need to be careful about. Go ahead and finish up here and meet me there.